Okay, good afternoon, directors, guests, staff, and members of the public who are in attendance today. My name is Jake Martins, and I'm the Deputy Corporate Legislative Officer of the Comox Valley Regional District. As this is the inaugural meeting of the Comox Valley Recreation Commission, I'm pleased to call this meeting to order. And we'll just start by recognizing that we are conducting this meeting on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. While many of our directors here are in attendance in person, I will just note that Director Arbor is participating remotely via Zoom, as well as our Chief Administrative Officer, Russell Dyson. I'd also just like to welcome also Trustee Waite from School District 71, who is with us today. Given that we have a gallery here in attendance, I will also just provide a little bit of housekeeping in which washrooms are provided for the public down the hall that you came in on, and then just to the right. And then in the unlikely event of an emergency, our muster point would be out in the parking lot to my left. There are emergency exits to my left here, 2 doors within the room, and then of course to my right here in the doors that you would have entered in on. Unless there's any questions, we'll proceed with the first order of business, which is the election of the chair and vice chair for 2023 for the Recreation Commission. This process is generally guided by the CPRD procedure bylaw number 1, and so we'll be following those rules in accordance with that. I'll provide a bit of a brief description of the process, and then would certainly welcome any questions any of the directors may have. The process starts by calling for nominations, and any director may put forward any other director for the position of chair. We'll start with that. I'll call 3 times for any nominations for the position, and then I'll ask each nominee in reverse order from which they were nominated if they will let their name stand for election. If more than one director is nominated, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make a campaign presentation. Following the speeches, I would then ask the directors to print the last name of their selection for the chair on the colored ballot, which we'll distribute to you should this be necessary. And then the ballots will be collected by myself and James Warren as the statutory officers to count and then announce the results. If there's more than 2 candidates and no candidate receives a clear majority on the votes on the first ballot, the candidate with the lowest number of the votes will be removed on the ballot and the voting will be conducted again. This process will be used until there is 1 candidate who receives a clear majority of the ballots cast. And if there are 2 tie votes, should that occur, the board or the commission would pass a resolution to either determine the election of chair by the drawing of lots or start that process over again. With that, I would welcome any questions if anyone has in the process, or we can proceed with nominations. Just making sure there's no questions online or otherwise. Seeing and hearing none. So we'll start this process again by calling for the nominations of chair. If you press your button, then I'll just be able to turn on anyone who puts it forward. Start with Director Jolie Kerr. Oh, sorry. My apologies, Director Moore.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Saw the wrong light.
I'd like to nominate Director McCollum, please.
Thank you. And Director Grieve.
I'd like to nominate Director Grant. Being a hockey nut, you know.
And okay. I will call a second time for any nominations of the position of chair. And I will call a third and final time for any nominations for the position of chair. With that, Director Grant, do you allow your name to stand for election?
Yes.
Thank you. And Director McCollum, do you allow your name to stand?
Yes.
Thank you. So with that, we'll distribute ballots to each of the directors, and Director Arbor, given your participation online, we will require you to send a text message. Ideally, that's to James Warren. If you don't have his phone number, let us know. But I think you do. So I will distribute these, and again, we just ask that you write the last name of the individual in which you wish to vote for, and then they will be collected. What's that? Oh, sorry. Thank you, James. So I neglected to include the campaign speeches. So you do have 3 minutes each of those nominated. It wasn't an attempt to avoid the campaign speeches. I can tell you that. We'll start with Director Grant. Again, you have 3 minutes for your campaign speech.
Thank you. Well, I don't think I'll take 3 minutes, but just like to say that I have a bit of a passion for the Rec Commission. I've been the chair of the Rec Commission in the past. And I think I can do a good job. I think I'm qualified for the position to run a good and fair process through this. I would also note that Comox does not have a chairmanship on any of the boards right now, and we do pay about a third of the money into most all of these things. And I think it would be, in fairness, a good thing to put Comox in as having a chair and at least some say in how these go. So I would look forward to being the chair, and I think I can do a good job for you.
Thank you, Director Grant, and Director McCollum.
Thanks. Yeah, I also think I'm well suited for the chair role at this commission. I have a passion for sports and recreation, and I've served at this board for a number of years now, and I think I'm well suited for the role. Sport and recreation is an important part of a healthy and vibrant community. Our recreation facilities provide a means of bringing people together, promoting healthy living, and fostering a sense of community connection. The Recreation Commission will be undertaking strategic planning in the coming months to set our priorities, goals, and investments in our regionally owned recreation facilities. The process the CVRD board took to identify our 4 strategic drivers: fiscal responsibility, community partnerships, climate and environmental stewardship, and Indigenous relations will help guide our decision-making. It's vital for the Recreation Commission to carefully consider spending priorities to ensure that our resources are allocated in a way that maximizes benefits for our community. I also believe that the Commission must continue to develop partnerships with the Comox First Nation, community and sport organizations, SD 71, and 19 Wing Comox. By closely working with our partners, we can ensure that our actions and decisions will best meet the needs of the people that we serve. I'm committed to working with all members of the Commission to achieve our common goals, and I ask for your support and for your consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Director McCollum. So yes, I will distribute these green ballots before you. If you can just please mark them, and then we'll come around and James Warren can take the box around the clock. Thank you. After tallying the results, I can confirm that Director McCollum has been elected chair of the Comox Valley Recreation Commission for 2023. So with that, we'll proceed with the vice chair election. So same general process again, with the one caveat being that 2 minutes for the campaign presentations, which we'll try and ensure happens. So at this point, I will call for nominations for the position of vice chair. Director Grieve.
Once again, I nominate Director Ken Grant.
Thank you. Director McCollum.
I nominate Director Kern.
And I will call a second time for nominations for the position of vice chair for 2023. Just checking online here as well. And I will call a third and final time for nominations for the position of vice chair. Seeing and hearing no further, Director Kerr, do you allow your name to stand?
I'll respectfully decline and defer to my esteemed colleague from Comox.
Yeah. And Director Grant, do you allow your name to stand?
Damn, I was going to defer to you. I will let my name stand, sure.
Then with that, I'm pleased to announce you as vice chair. With that, directors, I would now just ask for a resolution to destroy the ballots that were cast. Moved by Director Hillian and seconded by Director Grieve. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for your patience with this process. I will now turn things over to Chair McCollum to conduct the rest of the meeting.
Thanks, everyone. Just getting oriented on this system here. We'll begin by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the keepers of this land since time immemorial. I just want to quickly say how much I'm looking forward to serving as commission chair. We've got some really impactful decisions coming up at this table. We're going to be tackling our 4-year strategic plan in the coming month. And we're also going to be considering some significant long-term capital decisions, which are being introduced on today's agenda. And I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to working with everyone here and ensuring that our actions and decisions best meet the needs of the community that we serve. And with that, we'll move on to delegations. We had a late delegation request, so we'll need a motion to approve the attendance. Anyone opposed? That's carried. And so we have Jim and Rahul. Do I have that right? From the Comox Valley Cricket Club. Can I get a motion for receipt?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for giving us this opportunity to present this in front of you. And on behalf of everyone sitting over here, the passionate cricketers, I will take this opportunity to congratulate you, Ms. McCollum or the chair. And it's my first time, so I'm kind of a little nervous to not too much. Okay, so there we go. So straight to the point, cricket has been not played in the Valley in the past, more on baseball courts. And we personally felt that this is the time that we should go forward and ask for something more substantial. And this is what we start with. So cricket originated back in England in 1611, just to give you a little bit of history on that. And with the colonies, it got popularized, reached various parts of the world. And the interesting fact over here is that cricket in Canada go long way back, even before ice hockey and lacrosse. And by then Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald, who declared it as an official sport, but later on replaced because it was also the official sport of England. I guess, I don't know what happened there, but it was replaced by lacrosse and ice hockey, but still great sports. But we are here to talk about cricket again. So that's there it starts, a little bit of introduction. Why we need cricket in Comox Valley. The Valley is a diverse community now. And we, or everybody who believes in diversity, feel that sports or anything recreational should also have options, including diversity. And that's why we're initiating cricket as one of the options that we feel should be introduced now in the global setup. And plus, within the community, every time we play, one thing I can say personally that people will stop. People will say, like, when do you guys regularly play? Because I can't play because I'm 80 or 70, but I want my grandkid to come and see this. And that's where we got the reception. I felt like we should make it an initiative now. Cricket already established almost all part of Vancouver Island and mainland. We are the only city, I would say, on the whole of Ireland who was not supporting cricket or any team or any club or any kind of participation. Victoria has it. Nanaimo has it, even Campbell River has it. And for Campbell River, I will take a little bit of opportunity with Jim over here, who started this initiative 4 years ago. He talked about cricket in Valley. He got people together. For some reason, it didn't work out. He knocked doors for different councils. They all come, they play with us, they gave us the time, but nothing goes forward. And that's where this time we encourage him, like, Jim, let's do this again. We need that influence again. We need that vibe again. And he's like, let's do it. He's a passionate cricketer like us, and that's why we came back. And yeah. Community involvement, like what we want to do with community and cricket. And this is where it comes. It's an additional sporting option for all ages, with another global sporting option available to the Valley now. We will be focusing on organizing summer camp for schools, colleges, and encourage more participation. We will be focusing on youth program and promote more kids to play for the club in future and other clubs, as talent prospering still remains our commitment. We want to make sure that this coming year, we get more people involved if we have the pitch in the Valley. And then from there on, next year, we are part of the VDCA, which is the Victoria District Association that manages cricket all over BC and on the island. The third and fourth point, additional benefit of introducing another outdoor sports in the Comox Valley after the COVID pandemic, which we feel is another thing that we're providing as a good option, especially outdoor activities are a must now. The next thing is the ground availability. So we did a little bit of homework on our end, which was like, we decided what are the parks that we can actually present in front of you, and then you guys can decide like what makes sense and what doesn't. Lewis Center, Aspen, Lake Trail, Isfield, and Comox Rec Center were the few that we decided that we should put forward as a recommendation. But the Lewis Center is one that we all decided will make the most sense because it's a bigger ground. Centrally located, will be less cost efficient. It has the light benefits too. And when I say light benefits, like we know that we will be playing, so we have to accommodate with other sports. And the last thing we want to do is take someone else's spot to promote cricket. We want to make sure that we get whatever room and we get in when we start playing cricket. Lewis gives us that option, because we will have lights so we can schedule our game a little later. So when our baseball friends are done or our soccer friends are done, we are happy to take the back seat as far as we get that option to play. So that's why lights will always come into play. And if we go to a ground where like there's no lights and stuff, all of a sudden the cost rises up, and we are not here to increase that for you guys. We gave a little bit of homework on Lewis and how we want to do it. So this is what we kind of did. So the last whole year we played on the corner of the baseball, and technically that kind of became every newcomer who comes to the Valley start playing cricket over there. And as much as it's convenient to play, we felt that it's a need that we should be ensured when you're playing. And for doing that, we need a proper place and everything. And this particular corner, this diamond, was never used frequently. compared to the other two. So we made sure that the strip that we are making is not coming in the play area of the baseball guys. So when their game is done, we can simply go onto the pitch and then we can play. And with the lights coming into play, we can schedule it later too. And doesn't affect anybody. And another crucial point is like, because it's centrally located, everybody can come and be part of it. It's not an initiative that you have to drive separately or somewhere else. You can just come and play. And I think Lewis is so ideal for that. And now the main thing, what is our main ask? This is what we are asking. We come to you with all gratitude and seeking this 12,000 to 15. This is what we are looking at. And the source is Jim, who single-handedly did it in Campbell River. And that's the source it comes from, there where the cost comes from. And that's what we are seeking today. Finally, thank you for your time. Gratitude. And we'll take any question from like whatever there is available. Needless to say.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have a few questions in the queue, so I'll just open it up. While I learn this chart, first we have Director Kettler.
Thank you, Chair. And just want to thank you for your presentation. Your passion for the game really comes through. I'm not really familiar with cricket myself. And so I'm wondering what are the needs of the group for the game? Is there changes that need to be made to that field? Is that what the money is for?
No, so first of all, thank you for the question. And I'll just request Rahul, can you pass on the gloves and bat? Can you have a feel to the directors for the equipment? So like, so they all know like how it is, what it looks like. Yeah, guys, please go ahead. So that's a cricket bat that Inder is bringing up to you, and Ravi over there comes with. And then those stumps, and then Rahul will show you the equipment which we use as guards and stuff. And coming back to your question.
Okay, thanks.
So the cost we are actually asking for is only for the pitch. And I think as far as the light thing is concerned, I think one more pole on the corner of Lewis will settle the whole thing. Because right now the lights are on 3 sides of the park. And one side there's no lights, which is the parking side. So if I go back into this particular slide, I think it's not going back to if you see the park, Lewis Park, it has lights on 3 sides and one side there's no lights. So right on the parking side, like the 4th corner where there's no diamond, if there's one more lights, like floodlights are applied like or stood there or something, and even if it's not, that's totally fine. But we are seeking just the pitch for now. That's all. Like that's the cost for. But lights is something that just helps us scheduling to a later game. So we are not, that's the first thing, we are not coming into any other sports time duration because we don't want to do that.
So are you able to play on any regular baseball diamond?
Well, technically we right now play on it, but that's not the ideal pitch, how it should work. A cricket pitch is different and we require a certain concrete base and then the mat comes on top, and that's how you do it. And that's the proper way. And why the proper way is required, because the commitment is to make sure that we play VDCA, which is we play proper league. And when we say that we want to reach out to schools and colleges to encourage kids to join us, we want to make sure that they like the sport, they're making it big. Because cricket now, I'm promising you one thing, is a big sport globally. States is hosting the first ever World Cup in the history next year, along with the Caribbean islands. And that's how I personally feel is a time for Canada to, and Canada as a team is already like doing so good to qualify for the World Cups.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for that. And next up, we have Director Grant.
Thank you. Well, that was a lot of my questions too. I wondered if you had concrete on there and how that would work, but you seem to have answered that.
And if you see I mentioned the pitch, if you can see that, like that's where we actually want the pitch to be. Yes, yeah, please, John.
You'll have to come up to the microphone so that it comes through on our live broadcast.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Jim Bagley. I'm actually the president of Campbell River Cricket Club. And about 4 years ago, we actually approached Comox to build a pitch locally. But at that time, we couldn't really, in discussions, find a suitable venue. Cricket takes quite a large area. The diameter of a whole cricket field, or the radius has to be about a minimum of 60 meters. And that's a big ask for a lot of recreation facilities. And the critical thing about cricket compared with baseball is the ball actually bounces before the batter hits it. So it's very similar in essence to baseball. You've got a guy with a bat, a pitcher, you hit the ball and run. You in this case up and down a straight line rather than round a set of bases. But in cricket, the ball actually has to bounce. So the need for a flat surface to play the game on is critical. And these lads here to date have been playing locally using a softer ball, a tennis ball, which bounces okay on cut grass. But when it comes down to playing more competitive cricket, you certainly need that hard base. So when we couldn't find a location in Comox, we actually went with Campbell River. And at Carry High School, we actually built a concrete pitch there with a matting finish on the top of it. And so I've got a good idea of the costs and when Ashley actually talks about the costs of actually building a pitch, then they're pretty realistic costs. So I guess the ask is twofold, really. And Ash here has focused a little bit on Lewis Centre, but I think that conceptually what we're looking from the Recreation Committee at the moment is one, the possibility of a ground, even if it were not Lewis Park. Lewis Park is having looked around, is probably the best particular venue in that it does actually have the floodlights, which enables a lot, and it has its central location. But if Lewis Park turned out not to be a feasibility, then I think what we're looking for is support for the principle of building a cricket pitch at one of the locations that we've put forward, rather than specifically saying we're looking for a pitch at Lewis Park and the money to build it there. If that helps.
Understood. Thanks.
Yeah.
So we have a sort of thing where we like to only ask one question, but I have three, so I'm going to encapsulate them all into one, and then you can answer them. But so I don't find that 12 to 15,000 is a really big ask. It's probably quite doable. My biggest question, I may have missed it, is how many cricket players are there, and is this mostly a summer sport? Because I know you talked about having a hard pitch, and a lot of our fields turn into mush in the wintertime. So just wondering about those two things.
Okay, yeah. Yes, yeah, I'll do it for sure. Yeah. Essentially, cricket, we play in Campbell River. We start usually in April, and we play through to October outdoors. And then we switch indoors and we play six-a-side cricket in a gym through the winter season. So essentially, it is a summer sport here in Canada, and pretty well the world over. That's where it is. It's actually in terms of the demand and popularity, it's actually the second most popular sport in the world. I know we might see it as a niche sport here to some extent, but if we look at the Cricket World Cup final, 20 times more people watch the Cricket World Cup final than watch the Super Bowl. So it gives you some idea. After the World Cup soccer final, it's actually the most watched sport globally. It's got a tremendous multi-ethnic appeal to it. It's played in most, it started mainly in the former colonial countries, but now it's spread and has become a really popular sport throughout the rest of the world.
So I'm just wondering, local, how many players would you have here locally?
So right now we have 115 people actively part with us. And what happens, how we play is 25 or 30 every evening shows up to play a game. But they're all equally passionate about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to get it.
Thank you. We'll move on to Director Kirk.
Thank you for the presentation. And I also just want to take a moment to thank the members of the cricket club who invited myself and my son to join them for a day. Just for the other directors, there's an incredible group of athletes here, very skilled in their sport, and very put me to shame in many ways that evening. It's also a wonderful, friendly, diverse group, and it was wonderful to be part of this and to have a chance to find ways to support this group and the diversity that they represent here in the Valley. I found it really interesting kind of learning about the sport that day, how inadequate a ball diamond is. If you look at that circle, really it's a 360-degree field that they want to play on, they need to play on, and having a ball diamond with a backstop doesn't allow the tricky shots where you deflect it backwards and try to sneak a shot backwards. So, to have a proper game, you do need that full 360. What also struck me the evening playing with them is how little of a facility they need. They don't need a brand new field being built. It can coexist in many different other areas. All they need is that strip, and it's hard to see on this diagram, but that strip in the middle, that blue rectangle, if that was there, then it would give them an effective 360-degree field when the ball diamonds weren't in use. So that's another advantage as well. So anyways, just wanted to say again, thanks and welcome and great presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ko.
Thank you for coming today. It looks like that's all the questions. I think it was really useful for the commission to hear a little bit more about your sport and the participation in it locally. And what's being proposed here seems like well thought out and fairly reasonable given what we're able to do. But we don't consider delegation requests the day that they're received. So this will come back and we'll discuss it again at the next meeting. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And next up, we have our management report. And there's only one item on the report. Does anyone have any questions on that? Seeing none, anyone opposed to receipt? That's carried. And next up, we have the Comox Valley Recreation Commission terms of reference. Any questions or discussion on that? Seeing none, anyone opposed to receipt? That's carried. And next up, we have background materials for March 2nd, strategic capital planning session. And I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce Jennifer Saminden, Senior Manager of Recreation Facilities. And Jennifer is going to introduce each of these reports. There's 4 background reports that we are presenting in consideration of both the February 21st and March 2nd strategic and capital sessions that are being planned for the Recreation Commission. So Jennifer, I think you've got a couple of PowerPoints and some information to share.
Through the chair, thank you. We have 1 hour to get through an action-packed session here. So staff will try to get all the consultants introduced here fairly quickly. We did want to start off though with the recreation timeline up there, just bringing us back to the timeline presented by staff in December. Here we are, it's January 10th. We're going to review background studies and seek some public comment as per the board direction after this session is completed. February 14th, staff will be coming forth with a financial plan presentation, and the objective is to present a current facility status quo budget because we haven't gone down the road yet of strategic planning. February 21st, strategic planning session for the Rec Commission, the objective to define strategic direction for the next 4 years, followed by March 2nd, which is the capital development workshop based on strategic priorities. So the information that you're going to receive today, you're going to have the opportunity to dive into with staff on March 2nd. And at that point, the objective is to define priorities for community recreation facilities to serve the community in the next 20 years, with the final of a roadmap of facility improvements and objectives to guide staff work plans for the next 4 years and support the financial planning process. So on February 21st, the Rec Commission will undertake a strategic planning session on vision, goals, and priorities for recreation services in the Comox Valley. On March 2nd, again, that capital development workshop will be held to determine capital facility priorities and set a roadmap to achieve those objectives. So we are going to jump right into, if we could, the aquatic strategies.
Hello. Thanks, Jennifer.
So just before you go, Mike.
Okay.
The chair, staff will give you an introduction. So through the chair, staff are here today to provide the Comox Valley Rec Commission with an update to the aquatic strategy. Taking us back to the summer, the What We Heard report was presented to the commission in July. Since this time, the consultant has met with staff and completed a thorough analysis to present the following information to the commission: concepts for future capital development, an evaluation matrix to help the decision-making process, community health and well-being, environmental sustainability, accessibility, inclusivity, service excellence, and fiscal responsibilities. So now on that note, staff would like to introduce the consulting firm of RC Strategies, Mike Roma and Megan Carey, as our presenters for the aquatic strategy.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks to the chair and the rest of the commission and admin. We're very excited to be here to share some information with you again. I'm calling in from Treaty 6 territory and very happy to be here. We're actually joined by another gentleman named Paul Fast online, and he represents an architecture firm called HCMA, who has been instrumental in helping us come up with some of the options Jennifer mentioned and capital costs attached to those and so on. So I just want to make sure, Megan, we're going to share your screen. And we have a quick slide deck to go through with you. So I do want to also just reiterate that it's been a pleasure and very beneficial for us to be able to work with an administrative steering committee, which includes representatives from the city and the district, and that we are at the latter stages of this project. There are a few more steps, one being public engagement and another being kind of the finalization of the work that we've done. But what you'll see today is kind of an initial look at what the potential punchline could be for the aquatics strategy. So our presentation today is very heavily weighted towards Paul presenting some design options related to what the future could look like in terms of aquatics facilities in the valley. And then I'm going to bring the presentation back into talk about how we've sifted through all of those options and actually have a recommendation for you. Before I hand it over to Paul, though, I just want to make a statement here, or a couple statements, because they really set the context for these options. And I know Paul will talk to you to these a little bit in his presentation as well. But we did a very extensive review of supply and demand for aquatics throughout the valley. And what we found was that you have enough capacity, you have enough kind of basins, you have enough water now, and you should have enough moving forward into the future, into that 20-year time period. That being said, there is opportunity to make that existing inventory better in a number of ways. The first is to improve the leisure experience. That was something that we heard loud and clear, that current facilities, although they have leisure components, they might not meet the current leisure expectations of users. We also found that you could actually improve the operational efficiency of your current facilities, reduce the environmental impact of the operations of those facilities, and that accessibility could be greatly enhanced throughout those facilities. Those are obviously in addition to the addressing of aging infrastructure, which I think you're well aware of, or you will be after our presentation today and after you read the reports that we pulled together. So those statements kind of set the context, or the marching orders, if you will, for Paul and his team to develop the options, which I'll invite him to go through right now. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Mike. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you here virtually today. What I'm going to walk you through is the 4 different options that tackle a lot of the feedback that we heard and the analysis that Mike and his team have been working on. We had the benefit of visiting each one of these facilities, the existing facilities, and talking with the operators, and then also looking at all of the background information and analysis you've done in the facilities to date. So option number 1, Megan, if you can just go to that slide, thank you. This is what we're calling maintain status quo, which is essentially if the scenario was that there was no further investment desired in terms of changing program elements. This option just deals with the current infrastructure and maintenance related items that you would need to handle to keep the buildings going in an as-is condition for about the next 10 years or so. So you've done some facility condition assessment reports on each one of these buildings. And so we've looked through those and we've identified the items that are sort of mission critical over the next 10 years. And that's what's forming the basis of the capital cost estimate here today. So across all 3 facilities, that totals up at about $16.5 million. The outdoor pool, this one is the oldest facility you have. And so there's some kind of immediate issues that should be looked at relating to kind of the main drains and some other components. There were some other issues identified with the change facility here. It's difficult to sort of rationalize investment in that building on the scale that was presented in those reports without doing a bunch of additional remedial work. So we haven't recommended tackling the actual change room component at this stage. The sports center, the main items here that have been identified relate to the mechanical system, the air handling, and the roofing components. This is one component where you would see some modest gains in terms of the GHG or carbon emission reduction for your facilities. The other investments are all likely relatively neutral within that regard. But because you are changing the air handling units there, you could go to more efficient units. And the aquatic center has a range of items that have been identified, totaling about $8 million related to roofing and some mechanical components that will have to be tackled in sort of the next 10-year horizon. But all of those components are relatively neutral with respect to some of the priorities that Mike identified around inclusion, accessibility, wellness, leisure, and climate. Next slide, please. So the following 3 options are really sub-options of a single strategy, which is consolidating aquatic uses from the other 2 sites at the Comox Valley Aquatic Center site. And so I'll talk you through those 3 different sub-options. The first one is taking essentially the water area that you have at the sports center and relocating it as an addition to the aquatic center site. And so the water area that you're seeing here is roughly equivalent to what you have at sports center, but we would reconfigure the programming slightly to address some of the emerging priorities that we heard, especially around wellness and around leisure components. And so we would propose roughly a 15 by 15 meter tank for teaching and therapy uses. This would be slightly warmer water. There would be an additional hot pool, a large one, that would allow for different temperatures of hot pools to be accommodated. This would also look at reconfiguring the change room, making it more inclusive and more accessible than it currently is. And it would also include a modest expansion to your mechanical room just to handle the additional filters and mechanical equipment that would be required to service the additional water area. And so as you can see in this diagram, it fits relatively neatly on your existing site with little impact to parking or site circulation. And so could be relatively easily accommodated on your current site. And the capital cost at this point, just for the expansion component, the change rooms, the wellness expansion, and the mechanical would be about $25.8 million. Next slide. Option 2B looks independently at locating the outdoor pool functions from your current outdoor pool site to this site at the aquatic center. And so from a water area standpoint, we've carried the same amount of water area. Although again, we would reconfigure it to more modern standards from a code and a health act standpoint, but also just to address some of the evolving trends that we're seeing that have been highlighted, especially around leisure for the outdoor pool. Things like slides and diving boards and zero entry could be accommodated with a new modern outdoor pool, and that could be attached directly to the existing aquatic center, and it could make use of the existing change room. So you wouldn't have to build a standalone change room facility just for this pool, which makes it a little bit more economic or efficient from an operational and from a capital cost perspective. And the total capital cost for this component would be about $12 million. Next slide, Megan. Option C is taking both of those functions at the same time and locating them. So building them essentially as one phase, which would be the most efficient to do it. Although you can treat them independently, you can build either or independent of each other. And so really this is taking those two components, adding together. We would have to reconfigure the parking area. So there would be a slight modest reduction in parking at the site and reconfigure the rear service entry access. But you do have enough room on the site to handle the expansion of or the addition of both of those components. And this is really where you're going to see the most amount of sort of bang for your buck, if you will, in terms of the targets that it's or the priorities that it's speaking to. So you could deal make good strides in terms of the overall energy reduction or efficiency of the facility, because you're taking those older facilities out of commission and building more modern, centralized, efficient aquatic operations at one site. And certainly from a wellness and from a leisure standpoint, you'd be getting a lot of mileage out of adding the water in this sort of capacity at this site. And total cost value for this is approximately $35 million. Next slide, please. If we were to take all of those uses and assume that we want to locate those at a new site somewhere yet to be determined in the full capacity, so this would essentially take all of the water area that we're talking about, the full water area from the outdoor pool, the Comox aquatic site, and the sports center. If you combine all of that into a new facility, this is what you'd be looking at. And so the total cost here is the highest one out of all of the options. It's just shy of $90 million. That would include a 25-meter pool, a full leisure pool, water slide, hot pools, new modern change rooms, of course, the support spaces, and then the outdoor pool as well. And obviously from an energy standpoint, this is the most advantageous. It'll be the lowest sort of energy usage, and it will make the greatest reductions from a corporate standpoint in terms of your GHG profile, just because it will have to be built to very aggressive modern standards and codes. And so you'll see the most amount of sort of increase in or reduction, sorry, in that standpoint. And you'll have the most amount of flexibility in terms of designing to newer standards, and also addressing the newest trends and best practices that we're seeing in aquatic design. Option 4, please, Megan. Option 4, we've split out again into two options. This relates to the outdoor pool. This one is suggesting that you could relocate the outdoor pool at a new site. Again, the basis of this analysis is really taking the existing water area. So we're not expanding or subtracting water area, but we're reconfiguring it to make it more compliant with what we're hearing from your community around priorities and meeting modern standards and codes. And so the cost for that would be approximately $16.1 million. That would include also parking area and change facilities, mechanical rooms. That would be the total project cost. Next slide. And option 4B was one that we felt we had to look at. And this would be replacing the existing Courtney outdoor pool at its existing site. And so that would so there's a number of things that we needed to flag just around this. There's benefits, of course, to maintaining it in the same location. Some of the things that are going to be a little bit more challenging about that site is obviously its location within the floodplain. So to build a new facility to your new flood bylaw would require it to be built up quite a bit on the site. So you'd be raising the whole facility up by about 1.5 meters. And that carries with it some cost associated just in terms of connecting the new facility to the surrounding grade and the parking areas in the site. as well as some of the retention strategies from a technical standpoint that would be needed. And so you're seeing the capital cost here a little bit higher, about 2.2 million higher, or sorry, just a little bit more than a million higher than the other option 4, just to deal with some of those additional requirements for that site in particular. And I think that's it. So I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. So very good work that HCMA did for us there in looking at kind of putting the different pieces of the puzzle together in different ways. I don't think we'd be achieving what we were asked to do if we just stopped the project right there and left you with all of those different options and not provided any guidance as to what maybe we think as consultants would be your best course of action moving forward. So very complex decision to make, or complex question to answer there. And how we typically tackle those kind of complex questions is we think about the different criteria that you would or you should be possibly considering when making a decision like this in terms of which option is actually the right way to move forward. So in this case, and I'm going to summarize this very briefly. A lot of the background detail and scoring is available to you in the background report, but in order to navigate, I guess, our way through which option could be best for the valley, we looked at these criteria that are up on the right-hand side of the screen here. And really, they can be categorized into the different guiding principles that we use to do this work. So the guiding principles are, we wanted to obviously consider the community health and well-being impacts of making a decision, the environmental sustainability and mitigation of making a decision like this, ensuring that accessibility and inclusivity is included in our decision-making, as well as service excellence and financial responsibility and sustainability, which isn't just capital costs, but capital costs is definitely part of that discussion. So the criteria more specifically are proximity to other public facilities and spaces, the climate impact, the floodplain kind of issue that exists, the geographic distribution and access of the different sites or options, proximity to transit, service quality, regional growth support, capital and operating costs, asset life expectancy, future expansion capability, and land ownership. So that's a whole bunch of different criteria that are fully explained in the report. But when we looked at the different options that Paul just went through, and we applied this criteria to all of them and did scoring based on the metrics that you'll see in the report. The next slide shows the results of that scoring. And, you know, we could just arrive at one recommendation, but we also wanted to provide the commission and the city with a recommendation if you just wanted to look at indoor aquatics, or if you just wanted to look at outdoor, or if you wanted to look at both at the same time. So just looking at the indoor options that Paul provided, based on those criteria and our scoring, the recommended option would be wellness expansion at the aquatics center. So that's option 2A. If you were just going to look at outdoor aquatics, option 2B is what our analysis arrived at for recommendation, which would be the outdoor pool expansion at the aquatic center. And if you're going to do both at the same time, it would be option 2C, which is a wellness and outdoor expansion at the Comox Valley Aquatics Center. So in total, I guess in summation, our recommendation is that wellness and outdoor expansion at the Comox Valley Aquatics Center occurs, which is option 2C. We think that it delivers the most benefit to both the district and the city and residents, obviously, and that it supports the strategic priorities of the commission as we know them. So that's the punchline. That's how we've kind of navigated through all of those options and what we recommend. The next slide just highlights what our next steps are, and then I'll pass it back over to the chair for any questions that you might have. But what we're up to over the next couple of months here is reviewing the draft report, and that review has already started with admin. We'll continue with admin, and obviously will be reviewed by yourselves and other representatives of the city. There'll be a second round of public engagement, and our intent is to share these options and to share the recommendation and why we made the recommendation that we made, and hear what the community has to say or what regional residents have to say about that recommendation. We plan to adjust on the basis of engagement if it's warranted. If this is, it runs into a wall, if you will, from the public, or if there are other options that the public or other contributors might have to bring forward. And then we plan to finalize the report and bring it back to the commission and to the city in March of this year. So with that, I will pass it back to the chair and we can address any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the presentation. We are really running into a time crunch here. So we still have 2 more reports and only about 30 minutes left in the meeting. So we can do a question or 2 if it's really brief, but also this report is coming back to both the city and the town of Comox, I believe. So I would suggest that if any of the directors who are not on those 2 councils have questions, maybe to put their lights on now, and otherwise I'll let Director Grant do his question and we'll try and move things along as quickly as possible. I'm going to let Director Hardy go first here.
Yeah, thanks. I went through the report and I guess there's a lot of forecasting that's being undertaken with regards to the need for more enhanced facilities moving forward. And then there was the part with regards to the recovery of costs and how majority of that could be undertaken with the different folks that would come in and pay for their swim. Are we looking at putting the infrastructure in place, over the next 2 or 3 years? Or are we looking at more realistically something like 10 years down the road? The reason I asked you again, going back to the report, was there seemed to be a lot of forecasting with regards to how many people were going to be moving to the valley. And consequently with the population base, there's X amount of swims per population. But there still seemed to be a requirement from municipal governments to subsidize a portion of the cost of those facilities while they're waiting for people to come in and swim.
Through the chair, with the aquatic strategy plan, the idea is between 20 and 30 years. So certainly not immediate 1, 2, 3, 4 years.
And I'll let Trustee Waite go next, just with our time limitations here.
Great, thank you. I guess my one observation in this water shuffle, for lack of a better way to term it, is about travel, and wondering, I didn't see a lot of that in the report in terms of there's a couple of busy intersections in that area, and that part of the valley is pretty full, which is good and bad when I'm thinking about the hospital, bordering on an elementary school, then bordering on North Island College, and just the access to it for people who may not be able to use busing. And so that's just, there may not be an answer today, it may come out in the public consultation, but when I was envisioning what could be there, if this all went through in the sort of the current first choice of what the traffic would be like in that area, and if that had been considered at all. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. Does staff have any response to that, or you can leave it?
Through the chair, at this time, there may not be a response. There'll be some further conversations with the consultants. And when we reconvene on March 2nd for our capital planning process, we hope to have further information.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for your patience, Director Grandal. But you in the queue now. Thanks.
You were snubbing me because I ran against you. No, I was just wondering, I'll be really quick. I was just wondering on this, you talked about components and if we went with 2C, it's 35 million roughly. Is that plus the 16 million for the status quo? And if I'm just confused if we have to add the two together or if that's just for the components we talked about. And secondly, is there any asset management component in any of this?
Through the chair, we'll hand this one over to the consultant, Mike Roma.
Thanks. I was actually going to hand it over to Paul, so I might do that, Paul, and I'll add anything else. Paul's the number cruncher. Go ahead, Paul.
Sure. Through the chair. So the capital cost, the 16.5 million is the figure for all three of your existing facilities. So if you were to build the outdoor pool and the wellness center at that pool, and assuming that you take those other pools out of commission, that you no longer have to invest from a maintenance standpoint in those facilities, then you would not be adding the 16.5 to the 35 million, with the exception of the 8 million that was reserved in that total for the actual aquatic center itself. And to what degree some of those items in the $8 million maintenance schedule could be incorporated into the $35 million build is still to be determined. That's a finer level of analysis.
Thank you. I'll do one more question and then we're going to have to move on to the next item. Sorry, Director Hillian, I got to figure out what's he hearing here. There you go.
Thanks, Chair. Two very quick questions. There's reference in the report to land use, land ownership issues, but I didn't find any explanation of what that actually meant. So I'm wondering if somebody could clarify that, please. And secondly, there's no specific mention of the option of not replacing the outdoor pool, in fact, not having one. And I'm wondering if item option 2A by inference implies that the outdoor pool would not be replaced. If you, what your thinking was in relation to replacing the outdoor pool or not replacing it and not having one. Thanks.
Through the chair, staff will hand this one over to Paul.
And I think I'm going to hand this one over to Mike, actually.
Not bad. So thanks for the question through the chair. That is definitely why we have kind of broken that recommendation up into an indoor option, an outdoor option, and then a combined option. There was nothing in our analysis that suggested that strongly that you should discontinue any of the services that you have. But there was a fairly strong inference that you have enough right now, enough capacity with the current amount that you have to move forward in the time frame. So that's why it's broken up that way. That's a decision that I think you would, in conjunction with the city, would need to make with the commission in some way, shape, or form. And in terms of land ownership, that was a consideration that we included because some of the options don't actually occur on land that you own or that that the district owns or the city owns. So there are some pros and cons to investing in land that you do not directly own.
Well, maybe you could just clarify further, because I thought the implication was that there were issues with the existing aquatic center and the land around it of ownership there. Is that not the case?
I can clarify that. So currently, when you're looking to invest major capital, you'd like to have the long-term leases in place, et cetera, for the life of your building and looking forward. And we do lease the aquatic center land off of NIC. So we're just flagging that in that case, those issues haven't been resolved. I wouldn't even say there's issues. Those issues haven't been undertaken to look at if the longer term leases would match future capacity of buildings. But that's just flagged there, understanding that the site is limited to NIC's permissions. And we haven't had those conversations with NIC.
Fair enough, thanks.
Did you? I'm just going to let our deputy CAO weigh in for a sec about our time limitations here and some suggestions on how we can cover all our items.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, being mindful of time, we are down to 25 minutes left and there's still 3 reports to present and have engagement on. We're suggesting that perhaps at the end of this meeting, there be a referral of all 4 items to to a special Recreation Commission meeting that we could schedule prior to next Tuesday's elected officials forum. We would confirm the timing of that, but that would allow for more time for this commission to discuss and have dialogue on the reports.
Great, thanks. But we will move on to the next item just so we can at least cover some of these today. We should actually vote on receipt for each report. So we're voting on receipt of just the aquatic strategy right now. Anyone opposed to that? Yeah. Well, we already have a receipt motion. I'm just clarifying that it's just for the one item. Yeah. Moving on to the sports field study item. Can I get a motion for receipt of that? Any opposed? That's carried. Oh, yeah.
Through the chair, staff are going to just jump right in here and give a very, very short intro. Just as a reminder, sports field study work commenced in June of 2022 with the state of fields condition assessment completed post-sports season, which took this work through the summer and the fall. So it was very important to ensure this process supported all the partnering municipalities and school district 71 requirements for the accuracy and the outcomes. The final report is expected to inform the Rec Commission strategic planning session based on input from the January 2023 Rec Commission meeting, which is today. So on that note, staff would like to introduce the consulting firm of RC Strategies again, and our speaker today is Steve Sluta as our presenter. Over to you, Steve.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. I'm just going to share my screen here. Good afternoon, everyone. And as Jennifer mentioned, Steve Sluta, also with RC Strategies. And I'd be remiss without also identifying that we have another really important firm on our team named Binny. Binny's a landscape architect firm who I would say is probably the predominant or preeminent leader in sport field landscape architecture, certainly in Western Canada and potentially beyond as well. So overview of our presentation today, and I'll try to go through the slides as quickly as I can, recognizing that you are in a bit of a time crunch here. Just wanted to provide an overview of the strategy objectives itself, talk a little bit about the process and some of the key findings that we've uncovered to date so far, and then a very high level overview of the draft recommendations that are currently in a very preliminary draft of the strategy that we're working on with administration right now. So what was the sport field strategy looking to do? Well, it's certainly intended to be something that can help you as a commission and the various jurisdictions and partners in sport field provision guide some of your decision making and future investment that you're going to have to make. Likewise, establish some priorities around different sport field projects. Identify some high value opportunities to enhance the current inventory, as well as improve or optimize management practices. So how you allocate space, track data, all those types of things. And then also provide some guidance around a handful of key topics and issues that were identified in the request for proposal that we responded to. And some of those things identified for us to help provide some guidance on were future artificial turf needs. So essentially, do you need a second artificial turf surface in the area? Allocation, so how sport fields are booked and who gets priority access to space, fees and funding, as well as classification and maintenance of the inventory. So this slide here, just a bit of an overview of the process that we followed. So, we started the project in the spring and spent the balance of the spring and summer doing our research and engagement, made sense of that all through the summer and into the early fall. And now we're at a point where we're working towards having a final sport field strategy. Number of inputs, and I won't go into a whole bunch of detail on what these all entailed, but the graphic on the right there just shows you kind of how we went about uncovering and learning about the sport field situation and identifying future needs. So there's some engagement type activities in there, as well as analysis and research that we undertook in a variety of different ways. All of that was intended to help us answer some key questions, which are how well is the current inventory being used? What is the current condition, functional state of the inventory that you have right now? What are some of the experiences and perceived levels of satisfaction with that inventory? And then maybe most importantly, what are some of the future needs and trends that will drive some of those future sport field needs? So just very quickly, a few bullets here on some key findings, and obviously it's always challenging to wrap up, months and months of research into a handful of findings, but these would be our key takeaways here. The first bullet there, the sport field inventory is generally distributed well across the area. Over 80% of residents living in the CVRD can walk to a sport field of some type or quality within a 10-minute walk. So that suggests that there is a pretty good ability for residents to access fields to even just for spontaneous use to kick or throw a ball around. The second point there, we had the team from Binney get on the ground there and visit all of the different field sites and do some assessments, and that revealed that generally there's pretty good alignment between the field condition now and what was identified for the classification of fields way back in 2008. Third point there, what the team from Biddy certainly did capture through their assessments, and maybe not totally a surprise, and we would see this in most communities, that the municipal sport fields are generally in quite a bit better condition than school sport fields in terms of their level of maintenance, care, overall condition, things like that. And then just in terms of kind of trends and best practices, and looking at the existing inventory, we would say that there's certainly some opportunity to improve the support amenities in and around the field. So the field surfaces are generally in pretty good condition for the most part, especially at municipal fields. But some of the amenities like washrooms, change rooms, signage, and parking definitely identified some opportunities to make those better. There is an engagement process that supported our work as well, and that included a public survey and satisfaction levels with the current sport field inventory. There's kind of two stories there. Pretty strong during the spring and summer months, and lower levels of satisfaction during the, I guess we call it the wet months of the year, the fall and winter season. So, that was kind of an interesting dynamic. And the sport field users, through a number of discussion sessions, certainly told us time and again that they would like to see kind of improved support amenities in and around those fields. Again, things like lighting, change rooms, washrooms, seating, and so on. A few other key findings, population, some growth going on in the area, fairly consistent with the island and the province. Growth projections anticipate 15,000 new residents over the next 10 to 15 years. And based on some of our modeling, if we extrapolate that out into what that might mean 10 or 15 years down the road, it's reasonable to plan for needing up to about 2,500 incremental hours of sport fields. Just for some context, that 2,500 hours would be equivalent to the capacity of about one artificial turf field or 4 to 5 natural surface fields. So some of the draft strategies here that I'll go through again at a very high level. So these will be some of the recommended approaches that we'd suggest should be considered over the next decade or so. In terms of an artificial turf field, the capacity and utilization analysis we didn't necessarily suggest that the current artificial turf field at Vanier is bursting at the seams. However, with that said, the most efficient and effective way to meet future needs and provide the types of experiences that sport user groups are looking for would be to add a second artificial turf field. So our work would suggest that that type of amenity has some rationale to continue exploring. The team from Binney went and did some suitability assessments of a number of different sites for potentially a second artificial turf field. Unlike an amenity like a pool that's obviously quite complex to develop, an artificial turf field could, in theory, be kind of slapped down in a bunch of different locations. But the team from Binney has kind of an assessment approach where they look at a whole bunch of different things like site access, the ability to light the site without necessarily disturbing the neighbors, some of the earthwork considerations, existing amenities, and so forth. Through that work, they identified 3 preferred candidate sites, which are summarized on this slide here. And those 3 candidate sites all have different strengths and weaknesses, if you will, geographic context, and so on. One being Bill Moore Park. The second site being the JP Vanier Secondary School. So it would be pairing a second field with your current artificial turf field. There's a couple different locations on that site that would in theory be suitable, but the most suitable would be the northeast field and not the field that has the track around it. Just recognizing that track is fairly well used and important and probably not worthwhile disturbing that current site. So the northeast field, which is kind of lower adjacent to the school. And then the third site would be the Highland Park site in Comox. So those are the three three sites that rose to sort of the top there as being candidates for artificial turf. Just a few other considerations around artificial turf. The cost of a very, very high level cost estimate for that field would be in the $4 to $5 million range. Now, there's a number of things that can influence an artificial turf. Obviously, the condition of the earth, the geotechnical condition, the lighting, servicing, types of infills you want to do, drainage type considerations, roadway and parking. But that $4 to $5 million is a good number to work with. And out of that $4 to $5 million, about 75% of that is kind of the must-have, the actual surface project itself. And the other 25% would be maybe not nice to haves, but things that could be optional, like change rooms, washrooms, lighting, things like that we would strongly encourage, but that aren't necessarily part of the surface. And the last point there, I mean, regardless of the site that you move forward with, if you do move forward with the site, there's going to need to be another layer of planning that will further kind of validate the cost based on the specific site. Look at partnership models and opportunities and various operational considerations as well. And the strategy will provide some guidance to help you down that road. Just to summarize some other capital recommendations, the sport field strategy will provide a new sport field classification system that will identify the types of amenities for different classes of natural surface fields, and you can use that on an ongoing basis to identify enhancement projects. And the strategy itself will identify some specific enhancement types of projects. We've suggested looking at enhancing the washrooms and change rooms, as well as adding lighting at least 2 to 4 high-use sites, developing a Class A baseball hub, which would likely occur through enhancement of an existing site, and then initiating some long-term planning for a new multi-field hub site. Not something that's needed now, but something that would be needed in kind of the long term. But obviously, with any sport field site, amassing land takes quite a bit of time. So starting that planning now is prudent to do. This, and kind of lastly here, just wrapping up, the strategy also suggests a number of sport field management recommendations, things that aren't necessarily related to capital projects or infrastructure, but more around optimally how we manage and provide the inventory. So the strategy is outlining a new approach for allocations that respects kind of the historical element of, groups have kind of used certain fields for a long time, but also provides some clear standards of play in terms of how much time groups should be getting. Looking at spontaneous and unstructured use, so that kind of casual, non-program based use, continuing to promote that and maybe even enhancing efforts to promote that and get people kind of active and moving on their own at sport field sites. Shifting to a single point of contact for bookings, something we heard quite a bit about from the user groups is, they're dealing with a number of different jurisdictions. They're using fields, across the various communities. And moving to a single point of contact will support better data analysis, but it will also be more of a friendly user experience for those groups. Aligning policy and procedures, so things like trying to align practices amongst the different jurisdictions around fees and maintenance practices. And then lastly, a process for evaluating field needs for some of those new and emerging sports. And I know we got corrected by the cricket group that they're not necessarily a new sport, but they're certainly an emerging one. And the sport field strategy will provide some guidance around how to work with those groups to identify suitable sites and meet their growing needs for sport fields. So just to wrap up here, some next steps for us, just to continue to refine the draft strategy. Review that with the public and stakeholders, finalize the strategy, and then ultimately that'll be a final document that will be for administration, commission, elected officials, and so on to implement and use as a tool to make decisions. So with that, I'll happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that presentation. I think given where we're at in the meeting and that there's only 10 minutes left, we'll probably defer the rest of the items for a subsequent meeting so we can do questions on this field study report now if there are any. I have alternate director Jolly Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering if you could speak to a little bit more of the management recommendations, specifically the shift to a single point of contact for bookings and the new approach for allocations. And there's not really some background to some of these recommendations. So I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to some of that.
Yeah, thank you for the question and through the chair. Yeah, I mean, hard to capture everything that's in the strategy in a handful of slides here. But in terms of the single point of contact for bookings, as I mentioned, that was really emanating from groups' feedback that a lot of those groups are booking fields across the various jurisdictions and different practices. There isn't necessarily kind of cohesion between those booking practices in terms of the different jurisdictions always speaking to each other. So just shifting to a single point of contact would make that a more seamless process, both for the user groups. And I think just as importantly, it would help the various providers better collect and track some of that sport field utilization data, which was honestly a bit of a challenge for us in terms of gathering that in a consistent manner. Allocations, really looking at allocations and basing those around what we're calling standards of play. And that would be looking at, the various sports long-term development plans. So every sport in Canada through their national sport organization has to have a development plan, which clarifies for different age groups how much practice and game time they should have, the appropriate levels of play for those different groups and ages. So we'll be kind of using that as a basis to help guide allocations.
I have a follow-up. Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's okay. And I heard you speak to the user. I'm wondering in your assessment of some of these management recommendations, what your impression of, and you kind of alluded to it, the different mechanisms that the different operators of the fields are utilizing, and if it was feedback that the operators, so in this case, the municipalities and the CBRD shared, or if it was more from an analysis from the user perspective, specifically for the booking system.
Sorry, through the chair, just to clarify, you're wondering if that feedback came from the operators or the user groups? Am I understanding?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a fairly consistent theme we heard from a number of the user groups, and again, about a half dozen of the user groups booked quite significant amounts of field time through the various jurisdictions, and they would just like a bit of a simpler process, especially because most of them, if not all of them, are volunteer groups.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Seeing that there's no other questions, I'll just ask the one that I had when I was reviewing your slides in advance of the meeting. None of the possible recommended locations for an artificial turf surface is the Isfeld or Valley View fields. And this process started out of a delegation that we received from the soccer club, and they did explain a number of reasons why they thought that would be the preferred location. And we don't necessarily have to get into all that right now. We haven't seen the draft strategy yet, but I just want to verify that there is an explanation as to how the three preferred sites were landed on in the report.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chair. And yeah, there is. So, I mean, we probably don't have time to get into the technical details, but those sites were reviewed, and there are, I mean, they're both possible. I mean, any surface is essentially possible that's of a certain size, but both sites have some challenges that the team thinks it would not make them all that suitable or as suitable as some of those other sites we identified.
Great, and that is covered in the report?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, we'll revisit this again at our next meeting, so we don't need to delve into too many details, and I don't see any other questions, so I guess I accidentally had us vote on receipt already, so I think we should move to adjourn as we're kind of out of time here. Is that the best process? Oh, yes.
Special meeting on January 17th.
Yes, we'll need a motion to refer the remaining 4 topic areas. Thanks. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, anyone opposed to deferral? All right, that's carried. And we'll move to adjourn.